Daf. Monday is Daf Nun Hey. We introduced Shmuel's din of Din Malchus Dinah, and we spoke about it yesterday. The different arguments regarding Din Malchus Dinah, the basis, and then who affects, and so on. So now the Gemara continues on Din Malchus Dinah. Actually, the entire Stug of Din Malchus Dinah is the end of Bava Kama. But the Gemara here continues. So we're up to Daf Nun Hey, Amud Aleph. About 8 lines at the top of the page, last narrow line. Omar Rabbo said, Hani Tlas Mila, the following 3 things, Ishtoi Li were told to me by Ukvin Bar Nechemya, Reish Gelusa, who is the head of the Golus and Pavel, Mashmei de Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel. According to the Rashbam, number 1 is Dina de Malchus Dina. The very din of Dina Malchus Dina is number 1. Other Rishonim don't count that as number 1 because that's the umbrella. Everything we're going to learn now falls under Din Malchus Din. So the next one is Ba'arisusa de Parsoi. And the Rashbam gives 2 pshatim here on how to understand Arisusa de Parsoi, that in Persia, if somebody has over there a property, when is it considered a chazaka? Ad mem shnin, 40 years. So the law in Parsi was that it takes 40 years to have a chazaka. Even though the fact that you were there for 20 years, nobody protests, it proves nothing. If you're there 40 years, then you have like adverse possession, and it becomes yours. And you have no shtar whatsoever at all. So the first shot on his bomb is a Yid came and bought it from a goy who lived there 40 years. And he said, I don't know, the guy bought it, didn't buy it. The fact that he's there 40 years, and therefore, and I bought it from now, it is mine. That's one shot. The second shot is that a Yid, normally we say a chazak is 3 years, but not in Parsi. Over there, you need to have 40 years because that's Din Malchus Dinah. In fact, the argument between these 2 pshatim and Rashbam would seem to be what we talked about yesterday. By Dinah de Malchus Dinah, is it only in cases where the government directly benefits from it, like taxes and those things, or even dinim between one person and another person? If you learn it's dinim between one person and another person, then the government says Dinah Malchus Dinah, we legislate that's not 3 years a chazaka, it's 40 years. For 40 years you have to maintain your contract, and then after that we'll say, okay, it is yours. So the Dinah Malchus Dinah overrides the Torah in that case, or the halacha of the Rabbanan, 3 years. However, the third shot in Rashbam is no. As far as a Yid is concerned, the 3 years still remain the same because there's no Dinah Malchus Dinah about these laws between one person and another person. However, Dinah Malchus Dinah is that if a guy lives for 40 years in the land, it becomes his. That's a form of acquisition, and then the Eid buys from him is good enough. We did this, and also one of the reasons possibly why, even when it comes to properties, the Goyish government has to say is because they collect taxes from it. So therefore, they are also direct beneficiaries, knowing who owns the land. But then the Gemara continues. The next case is Bahani Zaharudi. These are rich people. The Zovin Ada Letaska. Remember, we lived before. There are people who couldn't afford to pay the tax, the land tax. So the government made a ruling. Anybody who comes forward and pays the land tax can keep the land. So these people who buy the land by paying the land tax, so they acquire the land, Zavinu, their purchase is a valid purchase. So if, let's say, the Yid who originally owned the land, a couple of years later came on to money, now he can pay the tax, too bad. The person who got it is totally entitled because Dinah Malchus Dinah. According to Rashbam, these are the 3 cases. According to other Rishonim, the third case is the following: Bahani Mila Lataska, only if it's a tax on the land tax. Avalakaga, but if it's a head tax, a personal tax law, a personal tax is only a liability on the person. There's no liability on the land, according to this opinion. And because there's no liability on the land, therefore, there's no din of Malchus Din. And meaning that the person who bought the property had no right to buy the property because there's no lien on the land. The government had no right to take the land away. By time of karga the government, because this tax is a head tax, not a land tax. However, Rav Huna ben Yeshua argues. He says that even let's say barley inside a barrel, mishtabde lekarga. Even a head tax is a mortgage, a lien on every property that you have. And therefore, because there's a lien from the government on the property that you have, if the government says whoever pays that this person's head tax can keep it, they keep it, and rightfully so. And rightfully so. Amar Rav Ashi said, Amali Huna bar Nosson told me, Kosher bar Mema had a problem. So you're telling me that if the government has a mortgage on let's say the land tax, the government has a mortgage on the property until you pay the land tax, it belongs to the government. If so, if a person dies, the rule is that a b'chayil gets double portion, but he only gets double portion in something that he is entitled to, something that is muhzik, something that's already there. But if it's only row, if it's only that somebody owes money to the person's father, he's not entitled to a double portion. It only is a sheyeshlo that he has, but not something that is row. In Cain, if so, but Tauta Yerusha so every property in the estate is only row because the government can come and seize it, take it away. As long as it didn't pay yet the tax, the government can take it away, which means, and the government's right is as if it's there because there's nothing that can stop the government from taking it. So as if the government as if the government already took it. And if the government already took it, but what? If you pay the tax, you get it back. So it's only row. And if it's only row, then a b'chor shouldn't get double portion. A b'chor give most of the b'chor is not entitled to take the row like a muhzik. It's only potential. Amalei, so Rav Ashi asked him back to Meimar, following your line of reasoning, then I feel taskanami, and even in the case of a head tax as well, even though there's no way, let's say, a lien or mortgage, but the government come in and take it away if they want to anyway. It can take it away, which means as if it belongs to the government already, it can go dummy. If it belongs to the government, it's only row. Why doesn't that bother you? What are you going to tell me? The Yov task of a mace. And by the way, it's not really a kasha, as I was trying to point out. Maybe taka. We said the b'chor is entitled to double portion in this country where they make these head taxes and the land taxes. But regardless, the Gemara said I have an answer. What do you tell me regarding the head tax? The Yov Tasker Maze. You're talking about a case where the guy paid the head tax and then he died. So the government has no rights to the property, and therefore the b'chor will get a portion. Here too, the Yov Karga Maze, that you give the land tax and then the mace and he died. So therefore the government has no rights there. The case and others want to know, why does the Gemara only highlight the case of the government? What about any other lien? A balchayv. Let's say a balchayv was owed money. A balchayv has a mortgage on the property, a lien on the property, or the wife. She has a lien on the property. So why don't you say, well, a b'chor is not entitled to, and everyone who passes, many people pass away predeceased their wife. So a b'chor never gets double portion because she has a lien on the property. So it's as if the property is by her already. As if it's already collected by her, and if it's already collected by her, then it's only row. If you pay out the ksuba, then you get the property back. So a b'chor shouldn't get double portion. Why don't we ask that? So basically, the halach is actually like Beis Hillel, not like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai in the section of Chofeda says, and if something is about to be collected, it's as if already is corrected. According to Beis Hillel, no, it isn't, because you can pay it out, you can do other things. So till you have it, you don't have it. So therefore, it's not Bashenkin, the government, because there's no one to stop them. But by the government, the tax department, they have the clause everywhere. It's as if they already have it. And that's why the Gemara only discusses the tax department. Then the Gemara further. And told me, I asked the Safri, the Rabbi, the scribes of Rabbi, and I asked him, how they conduct themselves with halacha. And he actually told me, I asked him what the halacha is like, and he told me that halacha that even a head tax, if you paid off the head tax and the government gave you the property, it's yours, legally yours. Says the Gemara. So Rashi said, no, I disagree with him. Also, they have a vested interest. All of these safra of Rava, these scribes of Rava, they wrote contracts. This Yid went and bought the property from the government. They wrote the contracts. They made money on it. And if you're going to tell me that they had no right to buy the property and the contracts are useless, they'll have to forfeit the money that they received. They don't want to, so they have a vested interest. That's why they said the halacha is like Rav Huna ben Yeshua, but it's wrong. and if we can't trust him. They only said it to be able to maintain their studies that they wrote, that they should remain credible. That's what they said. Rashi said, Pardach, a lady is a loafer. A loafer, we're talking about a case where the government makes sort of a tax on the entire community, and every person in the community has to pay a certain amount to make up that tax. If this person is a loafer, doesn't have a job, and he's a little useless and doesn't really have any money, so if we say that the community says that you don't have to pay, everyone else has to shoulder that amount of money. So therefore, he owes to the community, and he has to help them out. He must help the super community out in different ways because they are helping him out. But the Atzil to Mosa, that's provided that the community saved him from paying the tax, because it's talking about the taxes that Rashbam explains levied on the entire community, and then every individual has to pay their share. And since he doesn't, and everyone else has to then pay his share. But on Diske, in a place where every individual pays their own tax, nobody else has to shoulder the taxes of anybody else. And in that case, Andiski literally means the people who write contracts. Andiski, and then they went by him and they said, the government said, he has no money, we're not going to bother with him. Then say, he's a lucky guy. And he doesn't have to in any way reimburse the community, time or help or anything. Meitzah, we learned before about a meitzah, that's the boundary that's raised or lowered between two properties. So that intersects the two properties, that segregates them. A chatzav, interesting, it's a special kind of a tree, we're not sure what it is. But this tree, the roots grow vertical. They go straight down. The shoots don't go north, south, east, or west. They go straight down. And Yeshua, we'll see later, will use that tree to mark the different the boundaries of the different shvatim, and to segregate the shvatim. So if you have a meitzah mafsikin b'nichsa ger, if you have the state of a ger, which you said before is hefker, and we learned before machlekes, if you make a kinyan chazaka, according to Rav, if you make a kinyan chazaka machash, even a small amount, you're koina. According to Shmuel, the only kind of the place where you dug up, but not the rest of the place. According to Rav, you're kind of the entire field. Then the Gemara said, how much do you have to actually do to be kind of the entire field? We said that you go back and forth with the animal. According to Rashbam, you go east all the way to the west, or west all the way to the east, and then you get the entire field, including north and south, entire field. You have to make a bit more mamushes. And so the Gemara now says, but what happens if there's this demarcation and this now separates or divides the state of the ger into two fields? And we learned before, if you make a chazaka in one field, are you cleaning the other field? So this is not considered like two fields. So he says, mafsikin b'nichsager. Regarding nichsager, we learned already before, it's considered like two separate fields. You make a kinyan in one, you're not cleaning the other. Avali inyan peya. Peya is you have to leave a corner of your field, peya for the Armalite, for the poor people. But if you have two fields, even though you're one balabas, you have to leave on both fields. What about if you have one big field and you have this meitzar in between? Is it considered two fields and you have to, give pay on both fields or not? Regarding pay and regarding laws of tumah, which we'll see in a minute what that means, loy. There, it's not considered two fields. However, also Rabbi Yochanan, that was Rav Asi, and we have a number of times where they argue, and it seems like Rabbi Yochanan might have changed his mind, and that's why we continuously find arguments what Rabbi Yochanan actually said. When Rabbi came along, he said, Rabbi Yochanan, I feel the pay of tumah, even for pay and tumah, it's considered two separate fields. Because Rabbi Asi said that it's not considered to have things one big field. And Rabbi says, no, it's two fields. What's going on here? Peya, what's the story? Peya, now we learned, but the following, divide by Peya. Nachal normally means a river. Some people translate that here. Or Nachal, Rashbam says it means like by Nachal Esom, when we talk about Degla Rufa, it doesn't mean a river there, it means very, rocky dirt. So if you have a very rocky place where you cannot plant, or hashlulis, where, for example, the water brings together a pool of water. It's a pool of water, and that sort of divides the two fields. V'derech harabim, and derech harabim, which is on Lichos Shabbos, a road that's 16 amos wide, so that people can walk plus their animals, and v'derech hayachid, a private road which is a 4 amos wide. Shavil harabim, a laneway used by the public, but it's not really wide enough to have animals traversing there. And Shvila Yachid, a laneway used by private. hakavua that is fixed, bein b'yemaisacham, whether it is considered the summer, and bein b'yemais, in the summertime when very few people go there. And Bain b'yemaisacham, even sorry, the other way around. Summertime people do go there. Bain b'yemaisacham, even the winter when it rains, people don't go there. What do you call it? And whether it's the rain, these things divide the field into two. So the same thing over here. And the same thing over here, the machlekes is when the meitzar does the same thing, or that tree. Chatz is the same thing that divides the field into two, and you have to give 2 pages. Just like all these things divide into. Tezra brings from Yerushalmi wants to know if a derech hayochid divides the field in two. Of course, a derech harabim divides the field in two, and the shvil hayochid divides it two. Of course, a shvil harabim. Why do you have to itemize it? Tezra discussed it. Then the market is further tumah. Tuma Maihi, what's the case of Tuma? What do you mean divide two? The general rule by Tuma is that a suffix Tuma, where we learn out the laws of suffix Tuma is from Satan. By a Satan, we don't know if anything happened. But we don't know if anything really happened untoward between this man and this woman when they were discreet. But there's a suffix. And we are machman as if something happened. So by a suffix, but it's in a private place. So we learn from there that a suffix Tuma in a Shusha Yachid, we are machman. That's tummy. A suffix tumah in a shusarabim, because that's not like saita, it is tar. So the Gemara says over here, what's the story of tumah? Now we learn. Hanichnes lebika b'meisak shamer. Somebody goes to a bika generally means a valley, but it means a place full of fields, a savanna. The tumah besada place, and there was tumah in a particular field. But Amani said, Halachti l'mokam halal. I went into this general area, but I don't know. I don't know if I went into that field, and I don't know if I hovered over the body. The imlat. Rabbi Lezer Mitai. Why is it Mitai? But he said it's a Sfek Faker. What's a Sfek Faker? First of all, do you even know you entered that field? Something beer. And then if you entered the field, do you know for sure that you hovered over this body? No, it's a Sfek Faker. And Rabbi Lezer, Acham Metami. Why Acham Metami? They say it's only one suffix. The suffix is that when you went in the field, you go hover over it enough. Not 2 separate suffixes. So Rabbi Lezer says when it comes to tumah, there's a difference if it's in the same field or different field. The fact that it's in a different field makes it a sfek sveka. Something b'chlal if you went into you went into a field. Something went into that field. As if the field that you definitely went onto the field, but there's something that entered that field. So therefore, every field is different than the next. So according to Rabbi Lezer, every field is different than the next. So now we have a question: the meitzah, the chatzav, and we have a machlekes whether it separates the field as two, and therefore, as far as tumah is concerned, it makes it a suffix. You don't know if you went to this field, you went to that field, and then if you whether you hovered or not. Something be a toy, something magatuma tame. Something if you entered b'chlal you toy, but something if you touch something tame, you are tame. Not everyone agrees with pshat I just told you, which is the Rashbam. Rashi and Avodah Zarah is a whole different pshat, because generally we have a rule that Shus Rabbim, even one suffix is toy, and in the Shus Yachid even a svek sveka is tame. So no difference in Shus Rabbi whether it's 2 svekas or 1 suffix. So they want to say, not the pshat that there's a sfek sveka here. Rabbi Lezer, the reason why Rabbi Lezer says that is toyed, the reason why Rabbi Lezer says that is toyed is because he says Soita is not a question of whether they were together. The question is if anything happened untoward. Here the question is, did you b'chal go in? So because the question is, did you b'chal go in, it is totally different. Remember, we're talking here about why is it Shus Yachid? Because in the rain time, in the winter time, nobody goes there. So we treat like a Shus Yachid. So Shus Yachid, something to Shus Yachid should be tummy. Why is Rabbi Lezer saying it's tired? Because we said it's a Svek Sveka. But Rashi and Avodah Zarah says Svek Sveka doesn't help because in a Shus Yachid, even 2 Svekas, we should be machmer. I feel Svek is happening, Gemara says in Saita. So the Pshati says in Rashi, the suffix here is a very different suffix than by Saita. Here the suffix is the cloud that you walk in there, suffix beer. Over there it would be like suffix naga, something whether you touched it or not. By there, definitely they were together in the room. The question is if anything happened. Over here, the question is whether you were in the room together. Because it's a totally different question, that's why Rabbi Lezer holds Torah. The bottom line is There's a difference if it's one field or two fields, and that's the machlekes we had. However, the Gemara says, even though we have a machlekes regarding tumah and peya, whether the mates are in between, the boundary in between separates them as two fields or one field, but when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, Avul Shabbos, Loy Shabbos, definitely is considered one field. What do you mean by Shabbos? We'll see in a minute. Rava says, I feel it in Shabbos. Even regarding Shabbos, it's considered two fields if you have a matzah. What's the story? The Tanya, we learned in Gemara Hamatzniya, when you carry on Shabbos from one rishus to another rishus, there's two factors that are important here. First of all, where did you carry from and where did you deposit it? And number two is, what did you carry? There's a whole page there that it depends. There's a certain minimum amount that you have to carry before you consider liable. Whether it's a kazayas, whether it's the normal, it generally has to be the normal size that people would spend time carrying. So hoitzi chatzi gregers, you carried out a half of a dried fig. You need a full dried fig to be chayiv for carrying. You carried a half a fig, l'shus rabim. You put it down. Then then you went and you carried out another half a fig, but it's did by mistake. So you bring karbachatas, what happens? So if you did it without remembering in between that you're doing an aveda, then chayiv. But the shnei halamas, if you did it in two stages, in other words, you carried out half a gregus, and then suddenly you remembered, hey, I shouldn't be doing it, and then you forgot again, you carried out the other half. Then you are potter. Why are you potter if you carry less than a gregus? This is a very important rashbam here, and that's fascinating. This rashbam is here in Bava Basra Daf base, but this is significant in the Gemara Masechta Shabbos, but there's no Rishon in Shabbos that brings it. The Rashbam is Mechadish here. We know that one of the principles of Shabbos is Meleches Machshavos, which normally means that when you do a Melech on Shabbos, you have to have Machshava. You have to have intention. If you don't have intention, then we call it a Dover Shei Miskaven, unintentional Melech Gufa. You don't do it for the ultimate purpose. Mechadish the Rashbam, that Meleches Machshavos also means that it has to be choshev. It has to be significant. And if it's not significant, you are not chayiv. Without the Rashbam, how would we learn? Like the Gemara Sukkah says, that shiurin is halacha l'moshe Sinai. We would have thought that this din of greatness is halacha l'moshe Sinai. The Rashbam says no. It falls under Meleches Machshavos as a big nafkamin halacha. I'll give you one example. What about chatzi shir? If it's halacha l'moshe Messina that you're not allowed to carry gregus, if you only have a half a share, you're still chayiv ma'atayra. You don't bring a carbon, you don't get malchus, but you're chayiv ma'atayra. But if the vart is that in order to be considered a malacha, it's only if you carry a significant amount of gregus. If you carried half a gregus, it's not you're missing in the share, you didn't carry it. You're missing the whole quality of the malacha. And just like if you did an akira, you lift something up and you don't put it down in a shusarabim, we say that, we don't say, oh, he did a half a malacha chatzi shir. Because it's not a chatzi shir, it's a chatzi malacha. You didn't do a malacha. Same thing here. That's one nafkamin of Allah. Big machlek is nachareni when we say that halacha l'moshe Messina, that it has to be a gregorous, which is how most are trying to learn. What exactly was halacha l'moshe Messina? Was the halacha l'moshe Messina that you have to have a greatness, or the halacha l'moshe Messina was that it has to be a significant amount, and then the chachamim decided what that amount is, and that's another nafkamin halacha which way we learned it. And the Gemara continues, and Rabbi Yosi says it's not enough to be behelam echad that you forgot from the first half of greatness and you continue forgetting the second half, but you also have to bring it into one rishus. He says behelam echad and b'shus achas. It has to all be brought into one rishus. In the same rishus rabbi. The same rishus rabbi. You brought the first half, you brought the second half. But b'shtei rishuyos, if you brought them in two separate rishuyos, let's say two rishus rabbi, not the same one, then potter you are potter. Why? Because the rishusim divide the two, like two separate malachas. When do we consider it two separate rishusim? Is between the two rishus rabbim, you have a rishus yachid. So therefore, the Torah pronounces them as two separate rishuyos because you have a rishus yachid in between. Aval karmelis, a karmelis is not recognized by the Torah as being a separate rishus. Then why? It's like one big rishus rabbim. It's not a separate rishus at all. However, Rabbi says, I feel a karmelis, even a karmelis is also, a karmelis, for example, is a field in between. A karmelis is still significant enough that it separates the two fields. But about pistol, if you have a box or a piece of wood that is less than 10 tfachim high and less than 4 tfachim wide, according to the Rashbam, others learn it is 4 tfachim wide, but it's not that significant, therefore it doesn't really separate the two shusarabim. It's like one shusarabim. And Rava says, I feel a pistol, even a pistol separates the two. So you have two rishuyas, and that is the machlekes, whether it's the meitzad, and the other one is separates the two rishus rabbin into two, and therefore according to Rabbi Yossi, you're not chayiv, and the other one says no, it doesn't really separate the two, and they're like one, and you're chayiv. The other Rabbi Tamei, Rabbi is consistent with view. Rabbi says the shus Shabbos kishus gittin. The laws of Shabbos when it comes to the shus is like gittin. If a man says to his wife, "Here, I'm going to throw you get the yard down there is mine. I'm granting you the yard, it's yours, and I'm dropping the get there." But instead of landing on the ground, it landed on a pisla. And since the pisla is significant, it's separate from the ground, and all he gave was the ground to the woman. According to Rabbi, she's not divorced. What about Ein Sham Loy Metzer V'Loy Chatzav Mai? What happens if there's no, one big field? How do you do? There's one guy has a massive field. There's consider one field, two fields. How does it work? Are there laws what the perimeters of a field are, what the parameters of a field, and therefore it's considered two? It's a large expanse. How does it work? What happens? Loy Metzer V'Loy Chatzav. There's nothing to divide it. Mai, is it one big field? So I make a chazak on one end and I kind of the entire field. How's it work or not? Peter Rab Meronis Mishmoy, and this is according to Rab, who says you don't have to make a chazak on the entire field. So Rab Meronis says in his name, Machlekes Rishonim, whether it's an Amoid or a Tana, Kol Sheni Kras Al Shmoy. If the entire field is called on this ger's name, and you make a chazak on one big part of it, you're cleaning the entire field. Hey Dummy, what do you mean on his name? But a papa the Korele Begagusi the Paugia. So that's what Rambam explains. If we call it the fields of this ger in plural, then it's two fields. Then you make a chazak on one field, you're not cutting the next. If you call it the field of the ger, even though it's a massive property, it's one field and you are cutting. And it's like over here, they call it gargusa de pagaya, that there's a source of water, one source of water for the entire field. And we say that this field is from this, belongs to Yankel, who has the source of water. So therefore it's like one big field. Then he continued, just finish the Gemara. Yosef Rabbi Rabbi Kamei Rabasi Rabbi said Rabasi Yosef Kamei said Mashmei Rabasi Chanina Chatzuba Machzig Benichse Hager, and a Chatzuba also separates by a Nichse Hager. What's a Chatzuba? My Chatzuba. What's a Chatzuba? Omer Rabbi Rav Sheboy Tiyaches Yeshua Liyisrael. So these are the trees that grow vertically, the roots, and this is what Yeshua used to either, according to some Rishonim, separate Yisrael from Chutz La'aretz, or every single tribe from the next tribe. They grew these. You have like these pines. Sometimes they use them as the boundary fence. This will use a boundary, or these hedges. This will use a boundary fence. If you look at Yeshua, he only counted those cities that go along the boundary, and not all the cities. Tracy says it doesn't mean the boundary between Israel and Chutz La'aretz, which the Beit says it does. It means the boundary between one Shevet and the next, because there are a number of cities there that are inside Eretz Yisrael itself. So the Gemara further, we'll just finish here to the Mishnah. Kol Shehar Eyu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, any city that Moshe Rabbeinu saw from Har Navai before he passed away is part of Eretz Yisrael and Chayiv b'Maaseh. He saw Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it has all the obligations of Eretz Yisrael. Lafuki might exclude what? Lafuke, to exclude the three, you have the 7 nations, but you also have the 3 extra ones that were given to told Abraham, which we're going to get when Mashiach will come. Kini, Knezi, v'Kadmoni. Now those 3, even when Mashiach will come, when we get it, they are not part of Eretz Yisrael, as far as Maaseh is concerned. Tanya Meir says, Naftucha, these 3 countries are the following, which I don't know what they are. Naftucha, Arba, which is, I guess, Arabia, Vishalma, whatever they are. Rabbi Yehuda says, Havi Seir, is Har Seir, and Amoinu Moav. These 3 cities, Har Seir and Amoinu Moav, these are the 3 cities, they're not part of Eretz Yisrael. And Tayson has a discussion whether they are or not. Rabbi Shimon says, no. Ardiskim, Asya Vastamya. Rav Shimon says it's Spain. Spain is I guess Knizi. Asia, which some say is Asia, some say is Germany, and that is the other nation. And Ardiskim, which I'm not exactly sure which nation that is the 3rd nation. Okay, and these are the nations that will come to the Mashiach. Okay, we'll stop over here.